Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Shannon Salisbury was a 30-year-old woman from Burns, Wisconsin, who was last seen on the night of October 20th, 1994. Her disappearance has since remained a mystery, with the unsettling circumstances surrounding it continuing to baffle investigators and loved ones. On that evening, Shannon was at home with her live-in boyfriend. According to him, the couple had an argument that led Shannon to drive away from their rural home at approximately 9:30 p.m. After that, she was never heard from again. It's unclear what the nature of the argument was, but it seems to have been a catalyst for her departure, which would ultimately set the course for her tragic and unresolved fate. The following day, on October 21st, Shannon's car was found abandoned on Jewett Road, near Needfelt Road, about 5 miles from their home. The vehicle had a flat tire, but there was no sign of Shannon anywhere at the scene. Strangely, Shannon had left behind several personal items in the car, including her purse, wallet, and driver's license. Even more troubling was the fact that she had also left behind her 2 very young children, which seemed completely out of character for a woman who was described by those close to her as a devoted mother. The discovery of her abandoned car with no sign of Shannon raised immediate concerns, and authorities began to suspect foul play. The situation grew even more suspicious when it became clear that Shannon's boyfriend was uncooperative with the investigation. He maintained his innocence, but his lack of cooperation with the authorities raised red flags. Additionally, there were reports of a domestic dispute between the couple about a month before Shannon disappeared. In that altercation, Shannon reportedly expressed her desire to end the relationship, which could have potentially contributed to tensions that escalated to her disappearance. Shannon's boyfriend had custody of their children after her disappearance, but there was little movement in the case for many years. Despite efforts by investigators to piece together what happened to Shannon, the leads were few and the evidence was circumstantial at best. What happened to Shannon Salisbury on the night of October 20th, 1994, remains unanswered. Her family and friends describe her as a loving mother who would never abandon her children. They believe that foul play was involved in her disappearance, but without any solid evidence, the case remains unsolved. The questions surrounding Shannon's disappearance continue to haunt those who knew her. Did she really leave on her own, as her boyfriend claimed? Or was something far more sinister at play? As of now, no answers have been found, and Shannon Salisbury's case remains unsolved. The disappearance of Timothy Pitson, which began on May 11th, 2011, continues to be one of the most haunting and mysterious cases in recent memory. Timothy, a 6-year-old boy from Aurora, Illinois, vanished after his mother, Amy Fry Pitson, picked him up from school, claiming that there was a family emergency. This seemingly innocuous statement would set off a chain of events that would puzzle and devastate the community for years to come. Timothy's life had been marred by tragedy long before his disappearance. His mother, Amy, had struggled with severe depression for years, enduring multiple divorces and a history of suicide attempts. Though Amy had fought through many hardships, it was her bond with her son, Timothy, that seemed to keep her grounded. Timothy, in turn, was described by those who knew him as a bright, happy, and loving child. He was the light in Amy's life, the reason she fought through her personal demons. Amy's marriage to Jim Pitson, Timothy's father, seemed to offer hope for a fresh start. The couple had Timothy, and Amy poured all of her love into her son. However, their relationship began to falter as time went on, with constant fighting and increasing tension. Amy feared that her fourth divorce was imminent, and the idea that she might lose custody of Timothy seemed unbearable to her. This may have been a driving factor in her actions on that fateful day in May. On May 11, 2011, Jim Pitson dropped Timothy off at school, watching as his son excitedly ran towards his kindergarten teacher. It was the last time Jim would see his son. When he went to pick Timothy up later that afternoon, he was told that Amy had already picked him up, citing a family emergency. This was the first red flag. Jim knew nothing of such an emergency, and when he tried to call Amy, his calls went straight to voicemail. Amy and Timothy seemed to have vanished without a trace. In the days that followed, Amy took Timothy on a whirlwind trip, visiting a water park, a zoo, and a resort. The pair's travels were captured on CCTV footage, showing Amy buying toys and candy for Timothy. From the outside, it appeared as though Amy was trying to make her son's last days special, letting him live out a fantasy of skipping school and enjoying a carefree adventure. However, the reality was far more sinister. The two traveled to Wisconsin, where Amy made phone calls to Jim's brother, telling him that Timothy was safe. She also called her mother, reassuring her that Timothy was fine. At one point, Timothy's voice could be heard in the background of these calls, even though he sounded hungry and slightly upset. Strangely, Amy never called Jim himself, an odd omission considering their relationship and the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. On May 13th, Amy and Timothy checked out of their hotel in Wisconsin. CCTV footage showed them at the front desk, the last known sighting of both of them together. Later that day, Amy was seen alone in a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, purchasing paper, pens, and envelopes. Timothy was not with her, marking the first time on the trip that Amy was seen without her son. She would go on to purchase food from another store, again without Timothy. That evening, Amy checked into a hotel in Rockford, booking a room for one. It was there, in the early morning hours of May 14th, that Amy's body was found. She had taken her own life, leaving behind a suicide note in which she expressed her sorrow to her loved ones. In the note, she claimed that Timothy was safe but made a chilling statement: "He will never be found." The news of Amy's death and the disappearance of Timothy shocked the nation. The case quickly gained national attention, with the public deeply invested in the mystery of Timothy's whereabouts. Amy's note suggested that Timothy was in a safe place and would be cared for, but no one knew where that place was. Over the following weeks, months, and years, authorities received numerous tips about Timothy's whereabouts, but none of the leads ever proved to be credible. As time passed, hope dwindled. The case faded from the public eye, and Timothy's disappearance became one of those tragic stories that seemed destined to remain unsolved. Yet in the back of his mind, Jim Pitson never gave up hope. He believed that Timothy was alive and out there somewhere, waiting to be found. In 2019, Jim's faith was briefly reignited when he received a phone call claiming that a young boy had been found, and he was believed to be Timothy. The boy, who had escaped from a pair of kidnappers after being held captive for 7 years, said that he had been on the run before finally being discovered. Jim was ecstatic at the prospect of being reunited with his son. DNA tests were conducted, and the results were shocking. The boy was not Timothy. His name was Brian Reaney, a 23-year-old convicted felon who had fabricated the entire story. The revelation was a devastating blow to Jim, who had hoped for so long to find his son. In the aftermath of Timothy's disappearance, several theories have been put forth to explain what happened. The most widely accepted theory is that Amy killed Timothy before taking her own life. Blood found in her car is believed to be Timothy's, though it was later suggested that it may have come from one of Timothy's frequent nosebleeds. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, many still believe that Amy's actions, particularly her erratic behavior in the days leading up to her death, point to the possibility that she murdered her son before taking her own life. Some have speculated that Amy's statement in her suicide note about not wanting Timothy to be hurt by Jim could suggest that there was a history of abuse. Others have even theorized that Timothy might have been given up to a secret family, a cult, or even an Amish community. However, these theories remain speculative and unproven. To this day, Timothy Pitson remains missing. Despite years of investigation, the case remains unsolved, and his whereabouts are still unknown. His father, Jim, continues to hold out hope that one day, Timothy will return home. The disappearance of Timothy Pitson is a tragedy that has touched the hearts of many, and the questions surrounding it continue to linger. Theories abound, but the truth is still out of reach. Until then, the search for Timothy will continue, and his family will keep waiting for answers. Ruth Mazuchowski, a woman with a quiet but undeniably strong presence, was last seen on March 25, 1997, leaving a friend's residence in Paddock Lake, Wisconsin, early in the morning. She had just made a new life for herself, taking on a job she enjoyed and planning to separate from her husband. But after that day, Ruth simply vanished, and no one ever heard from her again. At the time of her disappearance, Ruth was living in Camp Lake, Wisconsin, on 95th Street. She had gone through a troubled marriage, and, according to her mother, Inga Booker, Ruth had been distant in recent years. Their contact was minimal, but the two spoke at least once a month, and it was during one of those conversations that Ruth revealed she was planning to leave her husband and start fresh. Ruth had moved in with a male friend only a few days before she went missing, but she assured her mother she was doing well and was hopeful about her future. On March 24th, the day before her disappearance, Ruth had reported for work in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. The next day, March 25th, she left her friend's house and was never seen again. She left behind all her belongings, including her clothing, jewelry, and personal items. Strangely, she didn't even claim 2 paychecks that were waiting for her at work, a sign that something was terribly wrong. Her mother, Inga, had made a visit to Ruth just a few days prior to Ruth's disappearance, trying to convince her to come home to Mississippi. Ruth had declined, expressing her desire to make a life of her own. Less than a week later, Ruth was gone. However, no one in Ruth's immediate circle reported her missing. Her husband, son, and the friend she was staying with all failed to take action. They each assumed someone else would step in, and the responsibility was passed around, never leading to the immediate response needed for a thorough investigation. The 2-month delay in reporting her disappearance severely hampered any attempts to find clues or piece together what had happened to her. Finally, Ruth's mother, fearing the worst, reached out to the authorities on May 19, 1997, nearly 2 months after Ruth had last been seen. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement, no substantial evidence has been found to indicate what happened to Ruth. The police have indicated that foul play may be involved, but without any solid proof, they can only speculate. They have not found any signs of life, leading them to believe that Ruth may be deceased. It's unclear whether Ruth was the victim of a crime, had an accident, or chose to leave her life behind entirely. What is certain is that Ruth Mazuchowski is still missing, and no answers have come forward. There are still theories about what may have happened to Ruth. Some believe that she may have met with foul play, possibly from someone close to her or even a stranger. Others speculate that Ruth may have staged her disappearance and decided to start a new life away from everyone who knew her. Given that her mother believed Ruth's marriage was troubled, it's possible that Ruth's decision to leave was influenced by more personal factors, and she may have gone into hiding to escape her circumstances. But after all these years, Ruth's case remains unsolved, and while law enforcement continues to keep the case open, there are few leads to pursue. Bua Weare, a woman who is known for her quiet strength and resilience, was last seen on the afternoon of March 23, 2003, in the vicinity of the 1400 block of Harvey Street in Green Bay, Wisconsin. At the time of her disappearance, Bua was accompanied by an unidentified woman described as being Hispanic and shorter than Bua herself. The details of that day remain murky, but what is clear is that Beulah's sudden and unexplained vanishing has left an enduring mystery. Her husband, Tyrone Weare, reported her missing a week later, on March 30, 2003, which happened to be his birthday. However, Tyrone's involvement in his wife's disappearance is viewed with suspicion. When Bua disappeared, she left behind all her belongings, except for her jacket, a detail that would later seem ominous, as it suggested she left in a hurry or under duress. At the time, Bua was in an abusive marriage. She had been the victim of domestic violence, and authorities later learned that she had been trying to escape the toxic relationship. Bua was reportedly attempting to secure a new place to live before Tyrone's release from jail. Tyrone had been incarcerated for domestic violence, and it was believed that Bua's desperation to leave him had become more urgent with his impending return. This period of uncertainty and fear set the stage for her disappearance. Following Bua's disappearance, Tyrone left Green Bay, adding to the suspicion surrounding his involvement. A warrant for his arrest was issued for bail jumping and failure to appear in court after he failed to show up for legal proceedings. Despite the investigation into Bua's case, Tyrone managed to evade law enforcement until 2005, more than 2 years after his wife was last seen. Although Tyrone was considered a person of interest in Bua's disappearance, he was never officially labeled a suspect, though his behavior after her disappearance raised many questions. In a strange twist, Tyrone M., where his life came to an end in July 2007 when he was accidentally struck by a car and killed. His death came 4 years after Bua's disappearance, and it did little to provide closure for the Weare family, especially Bua's daughter, who had been vocal about the pain and uncertainty that plagued their lives since her mother vanished. To this day, Bua's case remains unsolved, with her family still yearning for answers. Before she disappeared, Bua led a humble life. She was unemployed in 2003 and relied on community services for support, including food assistance from a local food pantry. Her routine included riding a bicycle between areas north of Ashland Avenue and east through Dan's Avenue in Green Bay. She was known to frequently communicate with her daughter, and it was uncharacteristic of Bua to go for long periods without making contact. This discrepancy in her usual behavior fueled suspicions that something had gone terribly wrong. Initially, authorities speculated that Bua might have gone into hiding to avoid her abusive husband, believing she might have left of her own accord to escape him. However, Bua's daughter vehemently disagreed with this theory, insisting that her mother would never go silent for such an extended period without any form of communication. The suggestion that Bua had voluntarily disappeared didn't sit right with those who knew her best, and as time passed, the possibility of foul play became a more prominent theory. Bua's family, particularly her daughter, has not given up hope. She continues to search for her mother and hold on to the belief that one day, justice will be served and Bua will be found. As of today, Bua's case remains open and unsolved. If you have any information about her case, you are urged to contact the Green Bay Police Department. Amber Lynn Wild, born on March 26, 1979, in Campbellsport, Fond du Lac County, Wisconsin, was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She was the daughter of Steve Wild and Julie Kerr, and her dedication to education and personal growth became apparent early on in her life. A remarkable planner, Amber displayed a drive and determination to succeed from a very young age, which impressed those around her. Throughout high school, Amber was not only a hardworking student, but also a proactive one. She began taking college courses through the University of Wisconsin, managing to earn 2 years' worth of college credits in just 1 year at a local community college. Her academic success earned her a full scholarship, and she planned on pursuing a career in pediatric medicine, a goal she worked tirelessly to achieve. By the time she graduated from high school in 1997, Amber had already completed her associate's degree and was well on her way to furthering her studies. Amber transferred to the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay to continue her education and had only just begun her pre-med program when she disappeared. At the time, she was 4.5 months pregnant, expecting her baby to be born in February of 1999. Amber had also become involved in the student government and held part-time jobs while juggling her studies and preparing for motherhood. Amber's last known communication was on the evening of September 23, 1998, when she spoke with her father, Steve. It was around 7:16 p.m. when Amber called him to report a minor car accident near University Avenue and Interstate 43. While Amber was not seriously injured in the accident, she did report hitting her head on the windshield, which left her with a headache. There were conflicting reports as to whether Amber visited a hospital or spoke to a nurse at school, but she was ultimately discharged after being checked over. Despite the accident, Amber sounded upbeat on the phone with her father. She assured him that she was fine and planned to head back to her apartment, as the damage to her car was minimal. Before hanging up, she asked her father to call her the next day to wake her up for her afternoon class, as was their usual routine. This would be the last time her family heard from her. Later that evening, the other driver involved in the accident, Heather Trail, called Amber's apartment to discuss the damages. However, it appeared the two couldn't reach an agreement, and the conversation was left unresolved. Amber had rear-ended Heather's vehicle, but fortunately, neither car sustained significant damage. Despite the accident, Heather, who had been celebrating her 21st birthday, went out that evening to continue her celebrations. Little did she know that she was one of the last people to speak with Amber. At around 8:30 p.m., Heather called Amber's apartment again to discuss the damages further, but there was no response. The following day, Amber missed her 1 p.m. class, and when her father tried to call her to wake her up, he received no answer. This was highly irregular, as Amber was known for her punctuality and commitment to her obligations. As time passed, and Amber continued to miss classes, an eye doctor's appointment, and other scheduled obligations, her family began to grow concerned. Her father, worried about his daughter's sudden disappearance, drove to Amber's apartment to check on her. Upon arriving, he found her apartment locked, with no sign of Amber anywhere. Steve immediately reported Amber as missing, marking the beginning of a long and agonizing search. Amber's car, a dark gray 1988 Subaru GL with a license plate number X5725T, was found abandoned on October 1st, 1998. The car was discovered in the parking lot of the 50-yard Line Sports Bar, located near Lambeau Field Stadium, on Lombardy Access Road. Strangely, this was the same bar where Heather had celebrated her birthday just days earlier. The coincidence was eerie. Heather later described the situation as weird, noting how odd it was that Amber had run into her that day, only to have her car turn up outside the same bar on the night of Heather's celebration. Upon inspecting the car, authorities found it unlocked, with the keys still in the ignition. The driver's seat had been pushed far back, indicating that someone taller than Amber had likely driven the vehicle last. Amber's purse was found in the trunk, and her cell phone was found on the seat, exactly where she would typically keep them. What was most puzzling, however, was the unexplained additional 900 miles on the car's odometer since its last service, which suggested that the vehicle had been driven during the week Amber had been missing. There were no clear signs of her at the scene or any evidence pointing to her whereabouts, further deepening the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Amber's family maintained that this was entirely out of character for her, as she had always been a responsible, committed person. Her sudden and complete disappearance seemed to defy logic. Despite the disturbing evidence, authorities initially considered the possibility that Amber had disappeared of her own accord. They noted that Amber had previously expressed some concerns about her pregnancy and how it would impact her life. However, her family strongly rejected this theory. Amber had not been depressed or upset about her pregnancy. Instead, she was responsibly planning for the future, eager to finish her education and raise her child. She had even confided in her aunt about the support she was receiving from her family, including the offer to care for her baby once it was born. With Amber's disappearance still unsolved, searches were conducted throughout Green Bay and surrounding areas. Bloodhound K-9 units were deployed and psychics were consulted, but nothing of significance was found. Authorities also enlisted the help of local hunters, urging them to keep an eye out for any clues, but still, Amber remained missing. Her family never gave up hope continuing to hand out flyers at Packers games and holding vigils and fundraisers in her name. They raised money for a reward and even established a scholarship in Amber's honor. In 2016, a breakthrough occurred when police identified Amber's ex-boyfriend, Matthew John Schroeder, as a person of interest in the case. Schroeder had been 21 years old at the time of Amber's disappearance. Amber had written extensively in her diary about her relationship with Schroeder and her struggles with the pregnancy. Schroeder, who had been engaged to another woman at the time, was furious upon learning about the pregnancy. Amber had confided in her family and friends that Schroeder had pressured her to have an abortion, but she had refused. In the weeks leading up to Amber's disappearance, Schroeder attempted to meet with her several times, but Amber ignored his attempts. Despite these efforts, Schroeder later claimed that he barely knew Amber and denied having a sexual relationship with her. However, phone records revealed that the two had exchanged over 60 calls in the months prior to her disappearance, and Amber's family confirmed they had been seeing each other for around 4 months. Schroeder's behavior after Amber went missing raised further suspicions. He displayed no apparent concern for her well-being and, after hiring a lawyer, refused to cooperate with the authorities. While no one has been charged in connection with Amber's disappearance, investigators are treating it as a homicide. In 2016, it was revealed that there was a second person of interest in the case, Nick Petit, Schroeder's colleague. Petit had claimed that his girlfriend had seen Amber's car, a silver Subaru, which matched the description of Amber's vehicle. This was significant because no details about the car had been released to the public by the time Petit made this claim. Petit also told investigators that Schroeder had told him he had spent the night of September 3rd, 1998, at the movies and had dinner alone, though Petit could not recall his own whereabouts that evening. Although Petit was not a close friend of Schroeder, their interactions raised further questions. The two had known each other for longer than they initially admitted, and Petit's wife testified that Schroeder and Petit had maintained close contact, even after Amber's disappearance. Investigators later sought out phone records from both men, hoping to uncover any conversations related to Amber's disappearance, but no arrests have been made as of yet. As the investigation continues, authorities remain hopeful that new forensic technology, including DNA analysis, may eventually provide the answers needed to solve the case. Green Bay Detective David Graff has stated, with her strong family ties and her determination to finish school, there's just no way she vanished on her own. Despite the passing years, Amber's family has continued to press for answers, and they hold on to the hope that one day, Amber's case will be solved. Amber's parents, Steve and Julie, have expressed that they no longer believe their daughter is alive. Steve Wilder said in 2000, "As much as we would like to be optimistic, it's almost impossible to imagine her still being alive." Despite the pain, he added, "I'm just making it through the days." Julie, Amber's mother, has said that although it is unlikely that Amber is alive, she will never completely lose hope. "There's no proof that she isn't," she said. "So I hold on to that little something. If Amber were alive today, she would be 45 years old." Amber is described as a white woman with long, straight brown hair and brown eyes, standing between 5 feet 4 inches and 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing approximately 135 pounds. She had 8 piercings in each ear, all of which were small gold hoop earrings. At the time of her disappearance, Amber was 4 months pregnant and was due to give birth in February 1999. Amber's case remains open and is classified as endangered missing, with authorities now treating it as a homicide. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the investigation is ongoing, and Amber's family continues to fight for answers and justice. If you have any information about the disappearance of Amber Wild, please contact the Green Bay Police Department at 920-448-3222. James Ruan, a 34-year-old man from Ripon, Wisconsin, was last seen by his co-workers at KT Products in Chilton on October 24, 1995. At the time of his disappearance, he was in the midst of a transition in his life. Recently divorced with 2 children, James had been living with a roommate, Jerome Bayer, in Ripon. He was also in the process of moving to Kiel, Wisconsin, where he planned to live with a new roommate. James's life seemed to be in a state of flux, with new changes on the horizon. Just 2 weeks before his disappearance, he purchased a new car and, on October 16th, he asked his parents, who lived in Florida, to send him $2,500. They complied, mailing him the money. On October 22nd, James attended church, a routine that seemed ordinary, but little did anyone know that would be the last time anyone would see him alive. By November 2nd, James had not picked up his paycheck, which was unlike him, and 2 days later, on November 4th, one of his siblings grew concerned. The family reported him missing to the police, initiating an investigation that would reveal even more unsettling details about his disappearance. A week later, James's white Dodge Aries station wagon was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Stret truck stop in the 500 block of East Pioneer Road in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. The car seemed out of place in the truck stop, and the scene itself was strange. The keys were still in the ignition, and James's belongings were found in the cargo area of the vehicle, suggesting he may have been in the middle of a trip, possibly en route to his new home in Kiel. Yet, there were some very odd and concerning details. Blood was found on one of the car's tires, raising questions about a potential violent encounter. Even more puzzling, cigars were discovered in the front of the car. James didn't smoke. The discovery of his car was just the beginning of a trail of disturbing clues. As investigators dug deeper, they learned that James's roommate in Ripon, Jerome Bayer, had cashed the $2,500 check James's parents had mailed him, using it for personal expenses. Bayer also used another check made out to James for $46.32 to pay the gas company on November 1st, just days before James's disappearance was reported. Bayer's actions raised suspicions, and he was charged with 2 counts of forgery and 1 count of uttering a forged check. However, despite these financial crimes, there was no clear evidence linking Bayer to James's disappearance. In 1997, investigators searched Bayer's pig farm, as well as other locations, but found nothing that could provide a definitive connection between Bayer and the vanishing of his former roommate. The investigation took another strange turn in 2000, when authorities discovered a chilling message written on the wall near the bathtub in the Ripon house that James and Bayer had once shared. The message read, "James Ruan lies here." But after investigation, it was revealed that Bayer's sons had written it as a joke. The discovery only added to the confusion and suspicion surrounding the case. Despite the various leads and evidence pointing to Bayer's questionable actions, no charges were ever filed regarding James's disappearance. Bayer continued to deny any involvement in his former roommate's vanishing, and investigators, though persistent, could not gather enough evidence to press charges. As the years went on, James's case remained unsolved. His family, left in limbo, could only wonder what had happened to him. The image of the abandoned car, the blood on the tire, and the strange cigar remnants continue to haunt those who followed the case. The lack of a clear resolution has left many questions unanswered. As of March 2025, the case remains unsolved, and James Ruan's fate continues to elude those who seek justice for him. Dawn Moen's case is a haunting one, leaving behind more questions than answers. On August 21st, 2000, Dawn was last seen leaving a corn roast at Lenny's Tap, a bar located on North Broadway in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was around 2 a.m., and Dawn was visibly intoxicated, struggling to walk properly. She was stumbling and losing her balance as she made her way in the direction of her home, which was just a few blocks away. That walk, which should have taken about 15 minutes, will be the last time anyone saw Dawn. The morning after her disappearance, her empty wallet was found on the 400 block of North Broadway, close to Lenny's Tap. This discovery raised alarms, but no further clues came from the scene. For 3 days, Dawn's boyfriend did not report her missing. When he finally contacted the police, he explained that it wasn't unusual for her to disappear for a few days at a time. He didn't seem overly concerned, believing that she would turn up soon, as she had in the past after drinking or arguing with him. But this time, Dawn did not return. A deeper look into her life reveals a series of troubling factors. At the time of her disappearance, Dawn did not have a job, a car, a driver's license, or any significant financial means. She was living with her boyfriend on Monroe Avenue, and he financially supported her. Moan's sister mentioned that the couple's relationship was rocky, and that they had a verbal and physical argument at Lenny's Tap just days before she went missing. It was during that argument that Dawn made a call to her boyfriend from the bar on the night of her disappearance, possibly hoping to get a ride home. However, her boyfriend ignored the call, still upset from their previous disagreement. Despite the apparent tension between them, the boyfriend has consistently denied any involvement in her disappearance. Police considered him a person of interest, but they were unable to gather enough evidence to press any charges. Authorities conducted a search of their apartment, but found no signs of foul play or evidence that would indicate a violent confrontation. Though he had an alibi for the time of her disappearance, he was at work. He refused to take a polygraph test. However, he did take 2 voice stress analysis tests, the results of which were inconclusive, leaving the authorities with no clear answers. Dawn's family, particularly her sister, emphasized that Dawn had always kept in close contact with her family prior to her disappearance. They believed that she would never have voluntarily disappeared without informing someone. They do not think it was in her character to leave her life behind, especially without a trace. Dawn had lived on Mackinac Island in Michigan before moving to Wisconsin, and her family remembers her as someone who enjoyed gambling and bingo. They can't imagine her simply vanishing without a word. One of the most curious and disturbing aspects of Dawn's case occurred after she disappeared. Cadaver dogs were brought in to search an area along the river near the location of her last known whereabouts. The dogs indicated the possible presence of human remains in a specific section of the river. However, due to technological limitations at the time, the search was only able to be conducted via radar, which produced no conclusive results. Despite this, the area of the river has since been dredged, yet no further clues have been uncovered. It's a chilling possibility that Dawn could have ended up in that river, but the lack of solid evidence has kept the case from progressing. As time passed, the belief among Dawn's family and the authorities grew that she may have been the victim of a homicide. There are many troubling signs pointing to foul play, but the evidence simply isn't there to prove it. There are no definitive leads, and no one knows exactly what happened to Dawn that night. Was she a victim of someone she knew, someone she trusted, or did she encounter a stranger while stumbling home intoxicated? The unanswered questions about her final moments weigh heavily on those who loved her. Dawn's disappearance remains unsolved. On the morning of May 24, 1996, Benjamin Wilberding was last seen at his parents' home along County Road CC in rural Tomahawk, Wisconsin. It was a seemingly ordinary morning, and there was little indication that it would be the last time anyone would see or hear from Benjamin. According to a witness, he was spotted leaving the house in a maroon car with 2 other individuals, reportedly heading toward U.S. Highway 8. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. From that moment on, Benjamin Wilberding vanished without a trace. At the time of his disappearance, Benjamin was 25 years old. He had recently moved back home to be closer to his mother, who was experiencing health issues. Despite any struggles he may have been facing, he had no history of running away or abandoning his life. In fact, just 2 days before he disappeared, he had started a seasonal job at Herd Millwork Company in Merrill, Wisconsin. He never picked up his first paycheck. Adding to the mystery, Benjamin left behind his personal vehicle. This detail is particularly strange because it suggests that wherever he was headed that morning, he didn't intend to be gone for long. A person planning to run away would typically take their own car, their identification, or at the very least, some form of money. But Benjamin left all of those things behind. The investigation into his disappearance soon took an unsettling turn when authorities discovered that another individual had Benjamin's Social Security card and driver's license in their possession. This person was thoroughly investigated, but despite the suspicious nature of this discovery, no direct evidence was found linking them to a crime. For years, authorities and Benjamin's loved ones grappled with the question, what happened to him? Several theories surfaced, but none were ever proven. His social security number has never been used since 1996, and his driver's license has never been renewed. In an era before smartphones and social media could track a person's digital footprint, Benjamin's disappearance seemed to leave almost no clues. Someone knew Benjamin theorized that foul play was involved. The fact that he was last seen getting into a vehicle with unknown individuals raised questions. Who were they? Were they friends, acquaintances, or strangers? Was he willingly getting into the car, or was there coercion involved? If he met with harm, where did it happen? Did something transpire along the way to their destination, or was Benjamin taken somewhere more remote? Despite exhaustive efforts to search for him, the investigation went cold. His parents held out hope for years that he might return or that some new evidence might surface. Sadly, both of his parents have since passed away without ever getting the answers they desperately sought. Years later, the former Wilberding home was torn down. Searches of the surrounding property turned up no trace of Benjamin. The rural landscape around Tomahawk held its secrets tightly, and despite law enforcement's best efforts, no solid leads ever surfaced. To this day, Benjamin Wilberding's disappearance remains one of Wisconsin's enduring mysteries. Did he fall victim to a crime? Did he disappear willingly under circumstances unknown to even his closest friends and family? Or did a tragic accident befall him, his remains hidden by time and the elements? Anyone with information regarding Benjamin Wilberding's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. The small town of Plover, Wisconsin, is the kind of place where neighbors know one another and life moves at a predictable pace. But on March 13, 2017, the peaceful veneer was shattered when 44-year-old Christa Cipher, a mother of 3 and a dedicated educational assistant, vanished without a trace. What at first seemed like an inexplicable disappearance soon unraveled into a tale of deception, domestic turmoil, and a crime that would ultimately send her husband to prison for life. Christa was last seen at her home on Hoffman Drive on March 13th. Though some clothing was missing, she left behind her car, suggesting she hadn't gone far or hadn't left voluntarily. At first, her husband, Jason P. Cipher, told authorities that she had likely run off with a boyfriend, a claim that was met with skepticism by those who knew her. Jason also alleged that Christa had stolen $30,000 from him before her disappearance. However, police quickly discovered it was Jason who had been making significant withdrawals from their shared bank account, nearly $40,000 over the months leading up to Christa's vanishing. While it was true that Christa had been romantically involved with another man, both she and Jason were open about it. The man in question had broken things off when he realized Christa wasn't ready to divorce Jason, but he insisted they remained on good terms. Given this, investigators found it unlikely that Christa had left without telling anyone, especially considering her devotion to her children and her job. Christa had suffered a broken ankle in December 2016, requiring her to wear an orthopedic boot. That boot had just been removed the day before she vanished, and her limp made it highly improbable that she had left on foot. Further complicating matters, local cab companies confirmed that no one had picked up a passenger from the Cipher home on March 13th. Christa and Jason's marriage was far from idyllic. Friends and family had witnessed troubling incidents of domestic discord, including allegations of physical abuse. One of their daughters recalled waking up one night to the sound of her mother yelling, "Call 911," only to see Jason break Christa's phone and run under the kitchen faucet. In another instance, the daughter saw her father tackle her mother. On a separate time, Christa had reportedly scratched Jason with a knife during a heated argument. Their home was not the picture of suburban tranquility it appeared to be from the outside. As authorities delved into Christa's disappearance, an alarming discovery turned the case against Jason. A plastic shopping bag containing Christa's smashed iPhone 7 was found in a dumpster behind a local store. Surveillance footage showed Jason pulling up to the dumpster, stopping for a few seconds, and then driving away. Though the fingerprints on the phone were unreadable, those on the shopping bag matched Jason's, directly linking him to the act of disposing of evidence. Further evidence painted an even grimmer picture. Jason had purchased 39-gallon plastic trash bags at Menards on the day Christa disappeared, yet these bags were nowhere to be found in their home. Curiously, when recounting his activities that day, Jason conveniently failed to mention his visit to the store. The most damning piece of evidence came from the local garbage collection service. On March 14th, the day after Christa was last seen, a garbage collector noted that the Cipher family's trash weighed between 80 and 90 pounds, far exceeding the 60-pound limit. Additionally, the trash had been placed in a different container than usual, raising further suspicion. Jason also made 2 visits to the Portage County Solid Waste Transfer Facility on March 15th and March 16th, and was later seen stopping by dumpsters on Wilson Avenue on March 16th. When investigators reviewed footage from a waste disposal truck emptying the Wilson Avenue dumpsters on March 20th, they saw something chilling, a black plastic bag, consistent in size and shape with a human body. In August 2018, Jason Cipher was arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse. His trial began in October 2019, and Jason maintained his innocence, claiming that Christa had a history of violence against him. His defense attorneys argued that there was no definitive proof Christa was dead, let alone that Jason was responsible. Even Christa's father supported Jason, stating that he believed his daughter was still alive and that the charges against Jason were baseless. But the jury saw things differently. With overwhelming circumstantial evidence, Jason's financial lies, his disposal of Christa's belongings, his garbage's unusual weight, and the damning footage from the waste facility, it took the jury only 2 hours of deliberation to find him guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again be a free man. The lingering mystery, though Jason Cipher is behind bars, one question remains unanswered. Where's Christa? Despite extensive searches, her body has never been found. Investigators believe that Jason disposed of her remains in a way that made recovery nearly impossible. The footage from the waste transfer site suggests a grim fate, one that likely ended in a landfill, buried under thousands of pounds of refuse. If anyone has information regarding Christa Cipher's remains or her final moments, they are urged to contact the Plover Police Department. Even though Jason Cipher has been convicted, the search for Christa herself is far from over. On the evening of October 2nd, 2002, Geralt Stret, a longtime corrections officer at Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, finished a shift and walked out of the prison where he had worked for 25 years. It was an ordinary evening, unremarkable to those around him. But what happened after he left the prison that night remains a haunting mystery, as Stret was never seen or heard from again. His sudden disappearance has left investigators, friends, and family searching for answers for over 2 decades. Geralt, known to many as Jerry, was a dedicated but quiet man. Divorced with no children, his life revolved around work and his passion for golf. Friends and colleagues knew him as one of the best amateur golfers in Wisconsin, and he had been eagerly anticipating an upcoming tournament on the weekend of October 5th to 6th. However, when he failed to appear for the event, concerns about his whereabouts began to arise. Those who knew Jerry well understood that skipping a tournament was completely out of character for him. His absence became even more alarming when he failed to show up for work on October 8th. Jerry had not called in sick, nor had he mentioned any upcoming plans that would require time off. By October 11th, after days of no contact, Jerry's father decided to check his son's apartment, hoping to find an explanation for his disappearance. What he discovered inside was deeply unsettling. The apartment was unlocked, with the lights still on and the television playing the golf channel, almost as if Jerry had just stepped out for a moment. All of his personal belongings remained inside: his wallet, identification, cell phone, car keys, and even his golf clubs. His car and motorcycle were still parked in the garage, untouched. The only item missing was his personal firearm, though no sign of struggle or forced entry suggested a violent encounter. Theories immediately began circulating. Had Jerry simply walked away from his life? Had he taken his own life? Or had something more sinister happened? Investigators quickly looked into Jerry's personal life and uncovered some troubling details. At the time of his disappearance, he was dealing with a series of personal struggles, including a recent fourth arrest for drunk driving. This latest charge jeopardized his career, and he reportedly feared he might lose his job. He had also carried emotional scars from a traumatic event nearly 2 decades earlier, the 1983 prison riot at Dodge Correctional Institution, where he had been taken hostage and tormented by inmates. According to his father, Jerry had never truly recovered from that terrifying experience. Had the weight of these burdens finally become too much for him? One theory was that Jerry may have traveled to Horicon Marsh, a vast wetland area where he often hunted, to take his own life. His friends noted that he was familiar with the area, and some believed that if he had intended to disappear, the marsh would be a logical place. Others speculated that he may have gone there for another reason, perhaps to check his deer stand, and suffered an accident that left him incapacitated. Despite extensive searches in the area, no trace of Jerry was ever found. Complicating matters, another event had unfolded around the time of Jerry's disappearance that led to wild speculation: the escape of Thomas Deering, an inmate at Dodge Correctional Institution. Deering's escape was a major incident, and another corrections officer was disciplined as a result. However, police quickly ruled out any connection between Deering's escape and Jerry's disappearance, leaving investigators back at square one. Despite exhaustive searches, interviews, and investigations, no concrete leads ever materialized. There were no withdrawals from Jerry's bank accounts, no activity on his credit cards, and no reports of sightings. It was as if he had simply vanished without a trace. Years passed, and with each year that went by, hope of finding answers faded. In 2009, as Jerry's case reached its 7th anniversary, his name was added to the NamUs database in hopes that new technology or fresh leads might shed light on his fate. Still, no new evidence emerged. Today, more than 20 years later, the mystery of Geralt Stret's disappearance remains unsolved. Did he succumb to personal demons and choose to end his life in the solitude of the marsh? Was he the victim of foul play? Or did he somehow start a new life, leaving everything behind? While some cases see closure through forensic advancements, confessions, or chance discoveries, Jerry's case remains as baffling as the day he vanished. If alive today, Geralt Stret would be in his mid-60s. His disappearance remains one of Wapen's most perplexing unsolved cases. Authorities continue to encourage anyone with information to come forward. For his family, friends, and former colleagues, the questions remain: where did Jerry go that night? And will the truth ever be uncovered? Anyone with information on the disappearance of Geralt Stret is urged to contact the Wapen Police Department at 324-7911. On February 16, 1987, 19-year-old Christopher "Chris" Winkler vanished from Burlington, Wisconsin, under circumstances that have left his family and investigators puzzled for over 3 decades. Chris, a young man described as happy-go-lucky and full of life, disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a family desperate for closure. His case remains unsolved, and his loved ones continue to search for answers. Chris Winkler was the youngest of 6 brothers and 2 sisters, born into a close-knit family in Burlington, Wisconsin. Described as a kind-hearted and jovial young man, Chris was known for his infectious personality and willingness to help others. He was the type of person who would give you the shirt off his back, according to his niece, Tanya, who has been tirelessly advocating for answers in his case. At 19, Chris was like many young men his age. He enjoyed partying, hanging out with friends, and living life to the fullest. However, his life took a dark turn in the months leading up to his disappearance. His crowd of friends changed and changed as he became entangled in a series of events that would ultimately cost him his life. In December 1986, Chris and 3 of his friends, two brothers and another male, were involved in a burglary at a local upscale restaurant and bar called the Auctioneer's Inn. The establishment was known to attract a diverse crowd, including biker gangs and individuals involved in organized crime. Rumors swirled that the restaurant was a hub for drug trafficking, and it was believed that Chris and his friends stole a significant amount of drugs and money during the break-in. The burglary was not just a petty crime. According to Tanya, the stolen drugs were worth thousands of dollars, and the group spent days partying and using the substances they had taken. However, the consequences of their actions soon caught up with them. Chris and his friends were charged with the burglary, and their court date was set for February 1987, just days after Chris disappeared. On the evening of February 16, 1987, Chris went to a friend's house, but the friend wasn't home. The friend's grandfather told Chris to leave, and he was last seen leaving the property in a panicked state. Witnesses reported that a black truck was following him, and Chris was never seen or heard from again. What makes Chris's disappearance even more chilling is that everything connected to him vanished that night. His belongings, his personal items, and even the black truck that was seen following him disappeared without a trace. It was as if Chris had been erased from existence. From the beginning, Chris's family believed foul play was involved. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance, coupled with the burglary and the involvement of his friends, pointed to a sinister conclusion. Tanya and her family are convinced that Chris was murdered, and they believe his so-called friends were involved. The two brothers and the other male involved in the burglary have been the primary suspects in Chris's disappearance. Tanya believes that Chris was seen as the weak link in the group, the one most likely to talk to authorities about the burglary and the stolen drugs. To silence him, they allegedly took drastic measures. The black truck that was seen following Chris that night belonged to one of the friends involved in the burglary. Shortly after Chris's disappearance, the truck vanished, adding to the suspicion that it was used in his murder and subsequent disposal of his body. For over 38 years, Chris's family has been searching for answers. His mother, who suffered from dementia in her later years, spent her life searching for her son. She would take her grandchildren to Dairy Queen, not for ice cream, but in the hope that she might spot something, anything, that could lead her to Chris. She passed away without ever finding closure. Tanya, Chris's niece, has taken up the mantle of keeping his case alive. She has worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, even when law enforcement seemed to have given up. Despite numerous searches, including the use of cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, no trace of Chris has ever been found. One particularly eerie lead came from a woman who lived on a property near where Chris was last seen. She claimed to see a figure walking from a barn to a creek every night, and she believed it was Chris. When investigators searched the property, they found traces of human blood, but no remains. The blood suggested that Chris may have been killed there, but his body was likely moved to another location. The Auctioneer's Inn, where the burglary took place, was frequented by biker gangs and individuals involved in organized crime. Tanya believes that Chris's murder was ordered by someone higher up in the criminal hierarchy, someone who wanted to ensure that the stolen drugs and money were accounted for. The friends involved in the burglary may have been coerced into carrying out the murder to protect themselves and their families. The fear of retaliation has kept many people from coming forward with information. Even after all these years, those who know what happened to Chris remain silent, afraid of the consequences of speaking out. Tanya and her family are not seeking vengeance. After 38 years, they simply want to bring Chris home and give him a proper burial. They have forgiven those involved, not for their sake, but for their own peace of mind. Tanya's plea to anyone with information is heartfelt and urgent. At the very least, tell us where his body is. We just want to bring him home for a final resting place. He was a person. He was important to us. You didn't just murder him, you hurt his whole family. Everyone who loved him has been affected. Please, if you know anything, come forward. No information is too small. If you have any information about the disappearance of Christopher Winkler, please contact the Racine County Sheriff Department at 262-636-3225. You can also reach out to Tanya through the Bringing Chris Winkler Home Facebook page or contact Jason Hebert, the host of the show, for additional support. The town of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, may be a name unfamiliar to those outside the region, but for those who live in southern Wisconsin, it carries a weight of history, charm, and, for some, tragedy. In 1974, this small town became the center of a mystery that still haunts residents nearly half a century later: the disappearance of Katherine Lynberg. Katherine, or Kathy, as she was affectionately called, was a 17-year-old junior at Oconomowoc High School. She had a bright future ahead of her, described by family and friends as a happy and kind-hearted young woman. With striking green eyes, light brown hair falling just below her shoulders, and a face dotted with freckles, Kathy was ready to enjoy one of the most memorable nights of her teenage years, her junior prom. Dressed in a light blue gown adorned with pink and brown trim, a delicate corsage, and a gold necklace, she posed for photos with her family before heading out for the evening. She was accompanied by her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Tim, a fellow student. The night of June 4th, 1974, was supposed to be a celebration, a time of laughter, dancing, and making memories. Instead, it became the last time Kathy's family would ever see her. Like many high school events, prom night did not end when the final song played at the school gymnasium. The celebrations continued at an after-party at the Concord House, a dance hall in the rural town of Concord, about 7 miles southwest of Oconomowoc. The venue was surrounded by marshland and farmland, nestled just off Interstate 94. It was an unassuming place, little more than a blip on a map for those unfamiliar with the area, but on that night, it was filled with students capping off their special evening. Sometime during the early morning hours, around 3 a.m., Kathy and Tim got into an argument. The details of the dispute remain unknown, but it was heated enough that Kathy decided to step outside to cool off. She never returned. Tim assumed that Kathy had left with friends. She had originally planned to stay the night with them, and in the confusion of the night's events, a misunderstanding occurred. Her friends thought she was leaving with Tim, while Tim believed she had gone with them. This miscommunication would prove critical in the hours that followed. Kathy's mother, Ruth, was not immediately concerned when her daughter did not return home. She had been under the impression that Kathy was staying with friends. However, Kathy was supposed to hand out programs at her high school's commencement ceremony the next day. She was also the maid of honor for a family wedding later that summer. Ruth knew her daughter would not willingly miss these commitments. As the hours stretched into the next day, panic set in. Kathy was missing. A ground and aerial search of the area around the Concord house turned up no sign of her. The rural terrain, with its marshes and dense vegetation, made the search difficult. Authorities also thoroughly investigated Tim, her boyfriend and prom date. However, Tim had never left the sight of his friends after Kathy stepped outside. He voluntarily took and passed 3 lie detector tests, and friends stated he was devastated by her disappearance. Then the case went cold. The Concord house gained a darker reputation 6 years later when, in 1980, another disappearance occurred. This time, it was a young couple, 19-year-old Tim Hack and his girlfriend, Kelly Drew, who vanished after attending a wedding reception at the same venue. When they failed to arrive at a carnival as planned and missed church the following morning, their families became alarmed. Tim's car was found in the Concord house parking lot, locked with his wallet inside. Days later, investigators found disturbing evidence: rope and shredded pieces of Kelly's clothing scattered about 3 miles from the venue. Then, Tim's body was discovered. He had been stabbed. 2 months later, Kelly's body was found. She had been assaulted and strangled. The gruesome double homicide rocked the community, and for nearly 3 decades, it remained unsolved. In 2009, nearly 30 years later, DNA evidence finally led to an arrest: Edward Wayne Edwards. A drifter with a criminal past, Edwards had been working as a handyman at the Concord house at the time of the murders. He was later linked to additional killings, including a 1977 double murder in Ohio. Sentenced to death, he died in prison in 2011 before his execution could be carried out. For a brief moment, the arrest of Edwards gave Kathy's family hope. They wondered if he had also been responsible for her disappearance. But this hope was dashed when it was revealed that Edwards had not even been in Wisconsin in 1974, ruling him out as a suspect. So what happened to Kathy? One theory suggests she may have wandered into the nearby marshes, overcome by frustration after her argument with Tim. However, given that she was wearing formal attire, including high-heeled shoes, this seems unlikely. Another theory posits that she attempted to hitchhike home. The Concord house was in a remote area, but Interstate 94 was close by. If someone with bad intentions had seen Kathy alone that night and offered her a ride, she could have been abducted and taken far from the area before anyone realized she was missing. Hitchhiking was more common in the 1970s than today, and many speculate that Kathy, tired and eager to get home, may have accepted a ride from a stranger. If this was the case, the person responsible could have taken her anywhere, leaving no trace behind. Despite extensive searches and countless leads over the years, Kathy's whereabouts remain a mystery. In 1995, her mother, Ruth, held a memorial service for her daughter, nearly 21 years after she vanished. Today, nearly 5 decades have passed, and yet the questions remain unanswered. If she were alive today, Kathy would be in her 60s, perhaps with children and grandchildren of her own. Instead, she exists only in the memories of those who knew and loved her, a vibrant young woman frozen in time. At the time of her disappearance, Kathy was 5 feet 5 inches, weighed 115 pounds, and had green eyes, high cheekbones, and pierced ears. Her full name was Katherine Lynberg. If you have any information regarding Kathy's disappearance, please contact the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office at 920-67-47300. May 1st, 1947, began as an unremarkable day in the rural farmlands of Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. The Weckler family, well regarded in their close-knit community, went about their daily routine. The father, George Weckler, attended to business in Jefferson, while Eleanor Weckler, the mother, managed affairs at home. Their 8-year-old daughter, Georgia Jean Weckler, a bright and active child involved in 4-H and school activities, had no reason to suspect that this day would be any different from the rest. It had rained earlier that morning, prompting a slight change in routine. Instead of riding her bicycle to Oakland Elementary School as she normally would, Georgia and her siblings received a ride. That afternoon, due to staggered school dismissals, Georgia was released earlier than her siblings. Rather than wait, she hitched a ride home with a neighbor, Mrs. Carl Fluerick, who was already there picking up her own children. The drive home was brief, and around 3:30 p.m., Mrs. Fluerick dropped Georgia off at the end of the half-mile driveway leading to the Weckler farmhouse. Georgia, dressed in a light-colored blouse and blue jeans, stepped out of the vehicle with her school books, a small May Day basket she had made at school, and a handful of letters she had retrieved from the mailbox. As she began her walk up the long driveway, Mrs. Fluerick drove away, assuming Georgia would be safely home within minutes. She was never seen again. Eleanor Weckler was not initially alarmed by Georgia's absence. She assumed her daughter had either entered the house quietly or had gone with George on errands. However, when George returned home at 6 p.m. without Georgia, the first pangs of worry set in. The family began searching the house and surrounding farmland, calling for her name. Panic escalated quickly. George's absence made no sense. She was a responsible child, not prone to wandering off. By nightfall, the Wecklers had reported their daughter missing to local authorities. Almost immediately, a search party was formed, consisting of police, farmers, and volunteers from the community. They scoured the property and the wooded areas nearby, but there was no sign of Georgia or her belongings. The letters she had been carrying, her May Day basket, her school books, all had vanished along with her. One eerie clue emerged early in the investigation: a set of deep tire tracks near the entrance of the Weckler driveway, as though a car had accelerated away at high speed. A witness who had been traveling along nearby Highway 12 around 3:40 p.m., just minutes after Georgia was last seen, reported seeing a black 1936 Ford sedan speeding away from the area. The driver was described as a blonde-haired man in his 20s, but no one knew who he was or what his business was in that area. Police immediately considered the possibility of an abduction. Given the quick disappearance, it was unlikely that Georgia had wandered off on her own. Authorities questioned locals and school teachers, one of whom, Mrs. Twist from a neighboring school, recalled seeing a suspicious black Ford sedan idling near the school earlier that day. When she approached the vehicle to confront the driver, he quickly sped away. Several townspeople later reported seeing a distressed young girl struggling with a man in a car matching the description of the suspected vehicle. The child was screaming, but no one intervened, assuming, perhaps, that it was merely a father disciplining his daughter. By the time these sightings were connected, Georgia had been gone for too long. The notion that Georgia had been kidnapped for ransom was considered, given the Wecklers' relatively comfortable financial standing. However, no ransom demand ever came. As time passed, the fear grew that she had been taken by someone with far worse intentions. Months passed with no sign of Georgia, until authorities turned their attention to a man named Beaufort Sinnett. Sinnett, a convicted rapist and later a murderer, had a history of preying on young girls. In the fall of 1947, while serving a life sentence for an unrelated murder, he confessed to abducting and accidentally killing Georgia. According to Sinnett, he and an accomplice had kidnapped Georgia with the intention of holding her for ransom, but had unintentionally overdosed her on sleeping pills. In his confession, he claimed they had disposed of her body in the Blue River near Blue River, Wisconsin. Investigators immediately searched the river and its surroundings, but no trace of Georgia was found. The ashes collected from Sinnett's hideout, a makeshift foxhole in a wooded area, were analyzed, but tests were inconclusive. Sinnett later recanted his confession, and without concrete evidence, he was never formally charged in connection with Georgia's disappearance. He died in a decade later. Georgia's case briefly reemerged when another infamous Wisconsin criminal entered the spotlight, Ed Gain. The deranged Plainfield man, later convicted for his grotesque crimes involving human remains, had family ties in Jefferson County. At one point, authorities speculated that he may have been passing through the area when Georgia was taken. However, there was no substantial evidence linking Gain to the case, and he was ultimately ruled out. Georgia's case went cold once again. Over the years, occasional leads and supposed sightings would reignite interest in Georgia's case, but each time, they led to dead ends. In the early 2000s, a new tip prompted law enforcement to search a wooded area, but nothing was recovered. The details of that tip remain undisclosed. One particularly chilling detail from Georgia's past came to light. She had, on more than one occasion, expressed a fear of being kidnapped. Whether this was simply the imagination of a young girl or an eerie premonition remains unknown. Today, Georgia Jean Weckler remains missing. Her case, while nearly forgotten by time, is still classified as an open investigation. Though her immediate family has since passed, distant relatives and local historians continue to hope that someday the truth of what happened to that bright, innocent girl on a rainy afternoon in 1947 will finally come to light. On a quiet summer night in June 2023, 13-year-old James Yablonsky disappeared from his home in Reedsburg, Wisconsin. A bright, independent, and rugged young boy, James loved the outdoors and had a deep passion for nature. He often accompanied his father and siblings on camping trips, relishing the freedom of exploring the wilderness. However, no one could have predicted that his love for the outdoors would one day become the backdrop for a chilling mystery that remains unsolved more than a year later. June 12, 2023, was like any other summer night. James had just completed the 7th grade and was looking forward to his summer break. That evening, his family went to bed, unaware that James had other plans. At 12:52 a.m., James was caught on the family security camera sneaking out of the house. He was carrying a backpack and 2 duffel bags. Just minutes later, at 12:59 a.m., James was seen on the same camera, this time driving away in the family's van. Sometime later, he He posted a haunting Snapchat video. His words were cryptic, yet deeply unsettling. No one cares about me. It's not their fault. It's no one's fault. It's my fault. I feel like I want to explain it, but I don't know how. I'm scared. I'm sad. I have no emotions anymore. I lost them. I'm not processing anything. My brain. Something happened to it. I'm sorry, people, if I can't make it. His father, Bill Yablonsky, later insisted that James was not suicidal. But the video made one thing clear: James was in distress. A trail of clues at approximately 3 a.m. Surveillance footage captured James arriving at his father's golf cart business in Wisconsin Dells. The drive from Reedsburg takes about 20 minutes, yet there were 2 unexplained hours between when James left home and when he was seen on camera. What he did during that time remains unknown. For nearly an hour, James remained in the van, parked in the business's lot. Whether he stepped out or met anyone remains unclear. At 3:54 a.m., the van pulled away. At 4:45 a.m., a deputy sheriff spotted the abandoned van on the side of a highway near Devil's Lake State Park in Baraboo, Wisconsin, about 25 minutes south of Wisconsin Dells. It was a seemingly random place for James to leave the vehicle. His family had never camped there before. At sunrise, Bill woke up to find James and the family van missing. He quickly checked his son's room and noticed that most of James's clothes were gone. A closer inspection revealed that Bill's personal cell phone, James's Wi-Fi-only phone, and 2 wilderness survival guides were also missing. More alarmingly, so was a handgun from a locked safe. Bill had no idea James even knew how to access it. By 8:45 a.m., police had connected the missing person report to the abandoned van. They quickly descended upon the area, bringing in search dogs to aid in their efforts. Near the van, they found a makeshift campsite. About 200 yards away, they discovered Bill's missing cell phone. The Wi-Fi-only phone James had taken was never recovered. Search efforts ramped up, extending into the dense woods of Devil's Lake State Park. The rough terrain, steep bluffs, and thick foliage made searching incredibly difficult. Over the next 5 days, authorities combed through the area, finding additional campsites, but only one could be definitively linked to James. At this site, searchers found a backpack, 3 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, a pillow from home, a jug of water, and an empty knife sheath. Helicopters scanned from above, while teams of officers and K-9 units scoured the ground. The public was urged to stay away due to the treacherous landscape, and 2 searchers were hospitalized due to injuries sustained during the effort. Despite these exhaustive efforts, James was nowhere to be found. By June 17th, after 5 days of intensive searching, police shifted tactics. Investigators believed that James might be deliberately avoiding them, attempting to live off the grid with the help of the wilderness survival guides he had taken. Law enforcement decided to back off, hoping he would reemerge or that someone would report a sighting. As the weeks passed, the search continued in a more passive manner, relying on patrols and electronic evidence. In July, investigators turned their focus to James's digital presence. They examined a tablet issued to him by his school and another that belonged to his family. Searches on these devices revealed that James had been researching ways to travel out of state, as well as specific locations in Wisconsin. However, when police checked those areas, there were no signs of James. By late July, Bill Yablonsky was desperate for answers. Convinced that someone had picked his son up, he mortgaged his home to offer a $10,000 reward for information leading to James's safe return. He expressed frustration at the lack of evidence. As much as they searched, they should have found some evidence of him being in there. And they found nothing. The FBI joins the investigation in early August. The FBI became involved, assisting local law enforcement in giving polygraph tests. Bill took and passed his, and police publicly cleared him of any involvement. They also ruled out James's estranged mother, who had not been in his life for years. By the fall, police encouraged hunters in the Devil's Lake and Baxter's Hollow areas to be on the lookout. Bill continued to plaster missing person flyers around the search zone, only to find them repeatedly torn down. He speculated that James himself might be removing them. In June 2024, James's family held a vigil to keep his story alive in the media. Bill still believes his son is out there, possibly taken in by someone or living off the grid. He recalled that a psychic once told him James had been seen heading west toward Colorado or Montana. While some believe James is still in the Wisconsin wilderness, others think he left the area entirely. Bill remains hopeful, but the unknowns continue to haunt him. I know somebody's got him somewhere. And I can't believe he hasn't been seen, or any tips have come in, or anything else. He's my son. I won't give up. If James's classmates or friends know anything, no matter how small, investigators urge them to come forward. A minor detail, an offhand comment, anything could be the missing piece to finding James. If you have any information about the disappearance of James Yablonsky, please contact the Sauk County Sheriff's Office at 356-4895. James's father has also set up a GoFundMe to support continued search efforts. For now, a family waits, a mystery lingers, and the hope for James's safe return remains unshaken. On September 22, 2012, David Schroeder, a 45-year-old father of 3 from Bryce Prairie, Wisconsin, vanished under circumstances so strange and unsettling that his case has become a landmark in the study of missing persons. David's disappearance is not just a story of a man who went missing. It's a story of a loving father, a devoted husband, and a man whose life took a sudden and inexplicable turn in the days leading up to his vanishing. To this day, no one knows what happened to David Schroeder, and his case continues to baffle investigators, his family, and the community. David Schroeder was a man who, by all accounts, lived a simple and fulfilling life. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches and weighing around 300 pounds, David was a gentle giant, a big teddy bear, as his wife Carla described him. He was a devout Christian, a dedicated family man, and a father to 3 sons, Michael, Devin, and Jacob. David had a close bond with his children, particularly Jacob, who had severe health issues due to spina bifida and hydrocephalus. David's life revolved around his family, his faith, and his work as a bus driver for a local school district. David was known for his kind heart and his willingness to help others. He had taken his wife's son, Michael, as his own when they married, and he later became a foster parent to Robert, an 18-year-old with learning disabilities. Despite his size, David was not an intimidating figure. He was tender-hearted, loving, and deeply committed to his family. However, David's life was not without its struggles. He had significant health issues, including diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. His diabetes was poorly controlled, with his A1C levels reaching dangerously high levels. He was on multiple medications, including antidepressants, and had recently been advised by his doctor to start insulin treatment. However, David refused, fearing that it would cost him his commercial driver's license and, by extension, his job. In the days leading up to his disappearance, David's behavior began to change in ways that were deeply concerning to his family. These changes would ultimately set the stage for the events of September 22, 2012. Monday, September 17, 2012, David missed picking up a child on his bus route due to a last-minute route change. This incident caused him significant stress, as he prided himself on his reliability and his ability to do his job well. The parent of the child was irate, and David took the complaint to heart. He felt the weight of the situation deeply, and it seemed to affect him more than it should have. Wednesday, September 19, 2012, David failed to show up for his midday bus route. Instead, he went to his doctor's office without an appointment. During the visit, David was extremely emotional, dizzy, and unable to sit up. The doctor, who was not his regular physician, decided to take him off Prozac and prescribed Wellbutrin and Trazodone. The doctor also gave him a week off work. After the doctor's visit, David was found sitting in his car at his favorite fishing spot, Lake Onalaska, in a distraught state. His wife, Carla, took him to their pastor for counseling. David seemed broken, and his behavior was unlike anything Carla had ever seen before. Friday, September 21, 2012, David seemed to be in better spirits. He spent the day with Carla, going rummage sailing and watching movies. That evening, he was supposed to pick up their foster child, Robert, and their son, Devin, for separate locations. Instead, David and Robert went on a bizarre night of drinking and erratic behavior. They visited a bar, then went to Hooters, where David became belligerent after being denied service for Robert. David allegedly threw items at staff and was kicked out. They were pulled over by police around 2:30 a.m. Robert, who did not have a driver's license, was allowed to drive David home after claiming to be the designated driver. David received a citation for not wearing a seatbelt. Went to Walmart, where David opened a bag of Snickers in the aisle and attempted to buy beer. They allegedly went fishing, though this was never confirmed. The events of September 22, 2012, are the most puzzling and tragic part of David's story. That morning, David and Robert returned home around 9 a.m. David claimed he had been home all night, despite evidence to the contrary. He appeared drunk and disoriented. Later that day, the family attended a church event. David's behavior became increasingly erratic, culminating in him throwing a soda can, nearly hitting a child. Carla took him home. At home, David continued to act strangely, claiming he needed to go back to the church event to be with their son Jacob. Carla left to return to the event, planning to take David to the hospital afterward. Carla left the house at 2:10 p.m. Their oldest son, Michael, arrived home at 2:25 p.m. and found David missing. David's phone, wallet, and keys were left behind. His work coat was also missing. A search was initiated, but no trace of David was found. In the days and weeks following David's disappearance, extensive searches were conducted. Cadaver dogs, air searches, and water searches were used, but no trace of David was found. A single footprint in a cornfield near the house was the only potential clue, but it led nowhere. The police initially treated David's disappearance as a voluntary walk-off, citing his erratic behavior and the fact that he was an adult who had the right to leave if he chose to. However, Carla and her family knew that something was terribly wrong. David would never have left his family, especially his son Jacob, who relied on him so heavily. Hashtag theories and speculation include the following. Did he have voluntary disappearance? Some believe David may have chosen to walk away from his life due to the mounting stress of his health issues, job problems, and personal struggles. However, his family finds this unlikely given his deep commitment to his family. A medical emergency, David's health issues, particularly his diabetes, may have caused a medical emergency that led to his disappearance. If he wandered off in a confused state, he may have succumbed to the elements. Foul play. While there is no evidence of foul play, some speculate that David may have encountered someone who harmed him. However, the lack of signs of struggle or forced entry makes this theory less likely. Die from alcohol and medication interaction. The combination of heavy drinking and new medications may have caused a severe reaction, leading to irrational behavior and his eventual disappearance. David's disappearance left a void in the lives of his family that could never be filled. Carla had David declared deceased a year and a half after his disappearance to access Social Security benefits for their son Jacob, who passed away in 2015. David's side of the family showed little interest in his disappearance, adding to the mystery and isolation Carla felt. Despite extensive searches and investigations, David's whereabouts remain unknown. Ivory Young was last seen alive on New Year's Day, 2013 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His disappearance quickly unraveled into a harrowing tale of gang violence, betrayal, and a brutal murder that left no physical remains behind. At 10:45 a.m. on January 1st, Young's roommate, Billy Griffin, initially claimed that a Chevrolet Impala pulled up outside their home near North 52nd Street and West Custer Avenue. Young allegedly got into the vehicle and rode away. However, he never showed up for work or a scheduled meeting with his mother the next day, prompting his family to report him missing. Investigators soon uncovered a much darker story. By the end of January, Griffin and 4 other men, Victor Stewart, Ashani McAllister, Ron Joseph Allen, and Devin Latrez Seabury were charged with first-degree intentional homicide in connection with Young's death. While Young was transgender, authorities determined that his gender identity was not a factor in the attack. Instead, the crime stemmed from gang ties, revenge, and a chilling execution inside Young's own home. A critical clue emerged when Young's mother found a cell phone outside his house, later traced to McAllister. As the investigation deepened, it was revealed that Griffin, Young's own roommate, had lied about his initial story. In truth, the other four suspects had approached Griffin, accusing Young of helping facilitate a burglary at Griffin's home the previous year. They offered Griffin a way back into their gang, the Chicago-based Black P. Stones, if he agreed to kill Young. According to Griffin, the situation escalated quickly. Young was lured into the basement, where his attackers taped a plastic bag over his head, choked him with a chain, and beat him with tools. Griffin claimed he left the basement at this point, but later heard 3 gunshots. The group then cleaned the basement with bleach, rolled Young's body up in a sheet, and transported it in Stewart's wife's car, a vehicle she later reported smelled of bleach. The final, gruesome act of disposal allegedly took place at a trash bin in the 8100 block of North 84th Street, where the killers set Young's body on fire. Despite an extensive search at a landfill in Menominee Falls, authorities never recovered his remains. Physical evidence supported parts of the story. Stewart's fingerprints were found on duct tape in the basement, along with blood spatters matching Young's DNA. A chain, burned clothing, and signs of a fire were found at the trash bin site. However, investigators never located the suspected murder weapon, a .22 caliber silver semi-automatic handgun. As the case moved to trial, Stewart and Seabury pleaded guilty to second-degree reckless homicide and testified against Griffin and McAllister. McAllister was convicted of murder in June 2013 and sentenced to life in prison, with parole eligibility in 2066. Griffin's first trial ended in a hung jury, but in February 2014, he pleaded guilty to reduced charges of hiding a corpse, aiding a felon, and solicitation of substantial battery, carrying a maximum sentence of 8 years. That same month, Allen was also convicted of murder and faced a life sentence. His body, as of March 2025, has never been found.